Chapter 19. Do you know someone called Kino Fasris Invern? Makoto asked softly. Rex raised an eyebrow, confused by the sudden question. He paused, genuinely trying to recall the name, but nothing came to mind. Nope, Rex said honestly. And I've got a damn good memory. So, how exactly do you think I came to meet this Kino? It might help me recall the person. His gaze narrowed slightly, noticing how the guy in front of him was clenching his fists, trying his best to hold back whatever storm was brewing inside. About 100 years ago, you came across a vampire, Makoto began, his voice trembling with restrained anger. You tricked her into falling in love with you. You listened to her dream of becoming human and promised her that the two of you could grow old together. You made her believe, and then you turned her human. He took a shaky breath before continuing. But it was a lie. She was only human for one day. Along with her human form, you two disappeared the next morning after getting what you wanted. Rex stared at him for a long moment, processing the accusation in silence. And then, with sudden, wide-eyed joy, he gasped. Number way, Landfall, you're my son, he exclaimed, utterly delighted. The sheer happiness in his voice was jarring, like a thunderclap of warmth in a storm of tension. As a father, Rex was clearly overjoyed to encounter his child, but his reaction left Makoto and the others stunned. None of them had expected that kind of response. I didn't know I was a father, we missed out on so much. Your first steps, your first words, Rex said, his voice filled with wonder. I have so much to teach you. His joy was disarming, so much so that Makoto's rage began to fade, if only slightly. But that flicker of peace was quickly drowned out as memories of his mother came rushing back. The fear she had carried for months while pregnant, terrified he wouldn't survive, the pain, the loneliness, none of it could be forgotten. But, first I need to explain myself to Landfall, he said quietly, his tone suddenly unsure. It wouldn't be right to just walk into your life like this, not without owning up to my countless mistakes. His eyes met Makoto's again, and this time, they weren't full of joy, but of quiet resolve and the weight of long-buried regret. You better, Makoto muttered, still unsure how to react. But just as the tension began to shift, he noticed Michael, and everything about Rex's guilt suddenly came flooding back to him. He wasn't given the chance to speak, however. Michael exploded with rage, conjuring countless clones that swarmed toward Rex like a tidal wave of fury. The clone talent, Rex said, unfazed. He calmly raised his palm and activated a skill from his Apex Singularity job class, Apex Control. Within the radius of this skill, Rex became the absolute, the omnipotent ruler of the domain. Inside this space, reality bent to his will. But such overwhelming power came with a cost. Only those with unmatched strength in both mind and body could wield it without breaking apart. As the swarm of clones reached Rex, they vanished on contact, one after another disintegrating like illusions meeting reality. Michael's main body let out a sharp, agonized scream as pain surged through his chest. From that very spot, an orb began to rise, floating out of him and into Rex's waiting palm. This is your talent, Rex said casually, turning the orb slowly in his hand. It's not really shaped like this, of course. I just made it look like this to help you visualize it better. He studied the glowing sphere for a moment, then looked down at Michael the way one might regard an ant struggling underfoot. I have the power to give and take talents, he continued, voice light but laced with menace. So, depending on your next words, I'll decide whether I destroy this little gift of yours, or give it back. He's your son, Makoto said quickly, the words striking like a thunderclap. Rex froze, eyes going blank. His mother is Anteline, Makoto added, and this time, Rex's eyes widened in shock. A heavy silence fell as he processed the revelation. After a long breath, he exhaled and slowly handed the glowing orb back to Michael. A chair appeared behind him with a flick of his hand, and he sank into it without a word, his expression unreadable. Can you put on some clothing? Mia asked, her face turned away, unable to meet Rex's completely unclothed form. Shut up, can't you see I'm standing before my kids? Rex said, clearly annoyed. But then someone whispered something to him. Mia was also his daughter. His expression shifted to pure confusion as he stood there, stunned. After a moment, he sighed, conjured clothes onto himself. He might have been arrogant, but he wasn't heartless. Making his children uncomfortable was never his intention. I get it, Rex said after a pause, his tone softer. You all probably hate me, and I understand. I really do. So take your time, gather your thoughts, and say whatever you need to say. After that, we can talk about how you want to go forward. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right, but if you decide you want nothing to do with me, I'll respect that, too. His calm, sincere voice left them stunned. It didn't feel like the arrogant man they'd expected. Michael stepped forward first, his eyes burning. He didn't hold back, shouting every bitter truth he had bottled up, how much he hated Rex, how much his mother had suffered, and how Rex had abandoned her, even killed her. The rage, the grief, all of it came pouring out. Rex sat through it all, his expression strained with pain, nodding slowly as Michael let out everything he'd buried for years. He didn't interrupt, he didn't defend himself, he just listened, silent, remorseful, and still. But then, something felt off. Makoto frowned, stepping closer. There was something unnatural about the way Rex just sat there. Curious, he reached out and poked him, only for his hand to pass right through, an illusion. Rex had disappeared long ago. The weight of the betrayal settled in like ice water. That day, his children learned just how their mothers had fallen for Rex. It was so easy to fall for his words because he did and said everything they wanted to hear. Rex hadn't and will never change. He was still the same manipulative scum who could play the perfect part, say all the right words, and pretend to be the father they always longed for. You really don't learn. The words were laced with exasperation as Rex stepped into the grand throne room, only to be greeted by Momonga's helpless tone. By his side was Albedo, who was looking at him with a gentle smile. What do you mean? Of course, I learn. How else would I be this strong? Rex replied with a cheerful grin, his eyes lighting up at the sight of an old friend. It had been 200 long years. But now, finally, he was home, and seeing Momonga again filled him with a warmth he hadn't felt in ages. Momonga stared at Rex for a long moment, saying nothing. His mind drifted back to a report he saw on the news back on Earth. Rex had been kidnapped by a girl to whom he had once promised the world. He gave her dreams, hopes, everything she ever wanted to hear, only to vanish the next morning without a word. That betrayal shattered her, and it was said Rex had sworn, in the aftermath, to never lay hands on another woman again. But of course, that too had been a lie. There were other stories, plenty, in fact. One of his former lovers had been disowned by her family the moment they discovered she was pregnant with Rex's child. Left with nowhere to go, no one to turn to, and hatred boiling in her veins, she tried to kill him. Rex survived, the knife wounds leaving scars that never truly healed. As for the baby, the child was left behind, abandoned to the system. There were countless other stories just like those, more than Momonga cared to remember. And back on Earth, things had been even worse. With the air choked by pollution and society in chaos, it was already a nightmare. But Rex had somehow made it more complicated. The last time Momonga checked, Rex had fathered over 500 children. All within a span of just 12 years. Many believed that number was conservative, and that more had yet to be discovered or officially reported. It was as if Rex had taken it upon himself to single-handedly repopulate Japan. Momonga, for his part, estimated the real number to be closer to 1,000. Rex was the type to never stick around after a night. He vanished just as quickly as he appeared. And protection, that was clearly the last thing on his mind. So, what's your plan to stop me? Rex asked as he slowly paced around the throne room, his eyes drifting up to the massive flag that draped across the chamber walls. The question hung in the air like a blade. What? Momonga blinked, clearly caught off guard, his thoughts halting mid-track. Even Albedo stiffened beside him, her eyes widening in disbelief. You know, Rex said, his grin curling with dark amusement, I'm pretty sure you had more than a few sleepless nights thinking about what you'd do if I ever turned against Nazarick. Me, coming back to take your spot as guild master. The wicked smile that followed was taunting, baiting, meant to dig under the skin. Momonga snorted, completely unfazed. You're the last person I'd ever waste time worrying about in that way. The words hit Rex harder than expected. He was moved. Really? Rex asked, his voice carrying a rare note of awkwardness. He didn't know how to react after hearing something that sincere. Sure, he knew he was great, but to hear it said so plainly was unexpectedly nice. Someone like you, Momonga replied. You fear responsibility. Worrying about you turning traitor would have been a complete waste of time. Rex flinched slightly, as if Momonga's words were an arrow that found its mark. I don't fear responsibility, why else would I have joined the guild? Rex asked defensively, his arms crossing as if to shield himself from the truth. Momonga didn't respond. He already knew the answer, but chose not to say it aloud. Rex had joined because he was lonely. He wanted friends, and Ains Ulgaun had welcomed him without hesitation. In fact, it was Rex who had played one of the biggest roles in turning Nazarick into the #1 ranked guild. In the anime, it had been ranked 9th, even with all its powerful members. But in truth, Rex had shaped the very foundation of the guild's rise. His influence and effort pushed not only the guild but every member within it into the ranks of the strongest players in all of Yggdrasil. Oh, before I forget, let me turn you into a god, Rex said casually, as if offering a snack. Before the game shut down, I changed my race. Right now, I'm only level 50, but I'm absurdly strong. His words hit hard, causing both Albedo's and Momonga's eyes to widen in stunned disbelief. I'm now a godly human, Rex continued, his voice light but confident. And with that comes the power to turn others into gods. At my current stage, I can create 15 low-tier gods a day. I haven't yet met the requirements to create mid or high-tier gods. There are 2 ways I can create gods, Rex said calmly. The first is by breaking a person down and rebuilding them from the ground up, reshaping them as I see fit. It's quicker, easier, and guarantees results, but it comes with a cost. You'd be unable to grow stronger without me, and your loyalty, well, that would no longer be your choice. He let the weight of that sink in before continuing. The second method is far more difficult. I help someone to evolve naturally, pushing beyond the limitations of their race. You'd retain your freedom and the right to grow without needing me, but you won't be able to advance to mid or high-tier godhood through my skills later. Still, it removes your level cap, granting you the potential to ascend on your own, if you're strong enough to meet the requirements. Of course, the second option, Momonga said without hesitation. Rex gave a simple nod of approval before slicing his palm open. His blood surged out unnaturally fast, forming 2 massive orbs that hovered in the air above him. With a casual wave of his hand, the blood orbs shot toward Momonga and Albedo at blinding speed, too fast for either of them to react. The orbs burst on contact, dousing the 2 in Rex's blood, which instantly began to seep into their bodies and fuse with them on a fundamental level. 3 comments 0 vote. Chapter 20 300 PS bonus. I won't hold back, Rex said as he took a slow, steady breath. If we're going to rise, we rise together. He extended his palm. In an instant, golden magic circles bloomed around Momonga, layers upon layers of complex magic circles locking into place as Rex began casting the spell. Rise anew. Momonga, the Overlord, born of the highest heteromorph, transcended mortal limits and awakened, as a true deity of life and death. Become the eternal sovereign, the ultimate necromancer. Rex declared, his voice echoing with divine weight as he held his palm outward. Using apex control, he manipulated the blood being absorbed by Momonga, shaping it into the blood of death itself. The transformation began instantly. Momonga's form twisted and refined as he evolved beyond his limits, shedding mortality altogether. That moment marked the birth of a god lich, one who now reigned over death itself with unfathomable power. Rex turned his gaze to Albedo. Albedo, succubus, confined to that alone, break free of all restraints and rise anew. Transcend your design, surpass the form once known. Evolve into the highest tier of your kind. Let your power soar to realms yet unseen, become the goddess of the succubi, unholy and demonic. His voice thundered through the air, carrying undeniable force. The blood Albedo absorbed began to glow a vibrant pink, her entire being pulsing with radiant, otherworldly energy. Her evolution surged forth, reshaping her existence into something far greater than any demon lord. She had become a demon god, the true goddess of the succubi. Rex watched in silence as the 2 underwent their transformation. It didn't take long. He had already adjusted time within the space to move faster, allowing the process to unfold rapidly. When the changes settled, Momonga and Albedo looked nearly identical to before in appearance. But the shift in aura was undeniable. They now radiated the overwhelming pressure of world-ending bosses, beings that stood equal to final threats in Yggdrasil. More than just an upgrade in power, they had evolved into entirely new races. This power, Albedo breathed, her voice trembling with disbelief. She could barely process the sheer strength coursing through her. A moment ago, she might have held her own against 2 or 3 players at best. Now, even stripped of her gear, she felt capable of standing against 70 or 80 players alone. That was beyond the scope of world enemies, who were feared for challenging 30 or 40 players at most. Her defensive stats were now off the charts, far beyond what she ever imagined possible. Even more terrifying was the arsenal of high-tier defensive skills she could now learn, each one stacking upon the next, granting her layers of protection no ordinary being could hope to pierce. But Albedo wasn't the only one transformed. Momonga, on the other hand, had evolved into something equally monstrous. With his new power, if given enough time to prepare his army of undead, he could easily stand against hundreds of players, and perhaps even more. Powerful undead. This skill allows the user to create undead that are stronger than they were in life. No matter how powerful the being was before death, the undead version will always return enhanced. The boost doesn't scale based on the creature's original strength, it scales with the user's MP. For every 100 megapixels the user possesses, the undead becomes 1% stronger than its living counterpart. Ains stared at the skill in silence. It was absurd, truly overpowered. Just thinking about it sent a chill through his undead bones. On top of this already broken ability, Momonga still retained his other enhancement skills that boosted the undead even further. Right now, the bonus wasn't game-breaking, yet. But what would happen once he had 10,000 megapixels? Or a million? The strength amplification would make his undead monsters into godlike beings, far beyond anything they had ever been in life. He also possessed a skill that restored any undead he created to their prime, meaning even an old man, once raised, would return in the full strength and vitality of his youth, while still retaining all the knowledge and experience from old age. On top of that, the undead under his command carried a deadly enhancement. Those they bit or scratched would be infected with a potent zombie virus, one that could spread rapidly and cripple entire armies. And that wasn't even the worst of it. Momonga now held an improved version of the goal of all life is death, a skill once requiring complex conditions and perfect timing to execute. But with his evolution, the spell had become far easier to cast, its only remaining limitation being himself. With his current growth, even that constraint was starting to crumble. "Have all of the floor guardians come and meet me," Rex said with a light, confident smile. "I'll have each of them evolve as well. Oh, and one more thing," he added casually, "you're now free to pick up new job classes. Choose the ones you truly want, although the job classes might affect the type of god you can evolve into next." "My lord, if I may ask," Albedo said respectfully, her voice calm yet curious as she stood behind Rex, who was scanning over the latest guild reports. "Why didn't you capture the Dragon Emperor if your intent was to study it? With his level of capability, he would make for a valuable research subject." "Oh," Rex replied after a pause, his tone almost too casual. "I didn't really think of it. I can always go capture him later." It had been a few days since Rex returned to Nazarick. In that time, he had already turned several of the NPCs into gods. Albedo had made it her personal mission to remain close to Rex, assisting him with anything he might need once her own responsibilities were finished. "By the way, if you're feeling guilty about trying to kill me, it's all cool," Rex said casually. Albedo's body stiffened immediately, every muscle locking in place. She hadn't expected him to bring it up, let alone with such bluntness. Anime-only fans wouldn't know, but Rex understood a lesser-known theory about Albedo. After the invasion of Nazarick, when Ains had erupted in rage, Albedo had viewed that moment of emotion as a dangerous weakness, one the enemy could exploit. The truth was, Albedo's loyalty didn't lie with Nazarick itself. Her allegiance was to Momonga alone, ever since he had rewritten her character settings. She was madly, obsessively in love with him, and that meant she placed him above all else, even above the guild, even above the other players. So, she had moved past Momonga, seeking out other players, and even took the strongest NPC in Nazarick with her. The reason was simple: to eliminate any player before they could ever reach Momonga, regardless of whether they were former guildmates or not. Of course, that had always been just a theory, a fan theory. But Rex had confirmed it the moment he saw Albedo appear in the desert. Still, it didn't bother him. Honestly, she had made the smart move. If he were in her position, he might have done the same. After all, for everything Momonga was, he was just too soft. "Please, Punish me, Albedo cried out, dropping to one knee with urgency, her voice trembling with emotion and guilt. Rex looked down at her, rubbing the back of his head with a sigh. If I had any intention of punishing you, he said calmly, I would have done it a long time ago. He paused for a moment, studying her kneeling form, then let out a quiet breath. Still, you're right, this might actually be something that deserves punishment. Go tell Momonga, he can decide. This isn't exactly something I'm good at, Rex said casually, shifting the responsibility onto someone else without hesitation. I'll keep the fact that you treat the guild flag like a discarded joke to myself. Albedo's body visibly trembled at his words. She knew full well the weight of his statement. Anyone who entered her room would find the guild flag carelessly tossed into the closet, an act of deep disrespect toward the very symbol of Nazarick. But, Rex continued, his tone softening, I expect you to speak your feelings instead of dancing around the issue. Avoiding it only leads to misunderstandings. Communication is key. I understand, Albedo said respectfully, bowing her head before Rex gave her a slight nod, permitting her to leave. Left alone in the quiet room, Rex turned his attention back to the document in his hand. He gave a soft exhale through his nose and slapped the paper lightly against his palm as he mulled over its contents. So, they're planning to conquer the world, he muttered lightly. And they're using the heroes as pawns, making them play the role of global peacekeepers just long enough for the people to believe their rule is the best path forward. The Sorcerer Kingdom had stepped boldly onto the world stage. To gain the acceptance of neighboring nations, Ains had publicly justified the destruction of the slain theocracy, claiming it was in retaliation for their attack on Shaltir and the mind control inflicted upon her. Naturally, the other nations welcomed them, after all, who would willingly choose to make an enemy of such overwhelming power? But beneath the surface, things were far from peaceful. Despite their smiles and formal treaties, many rulers quietly threw their support behind the hero party. As for the people of the Sorcerer Kingdom, fear clung to them like a shadow. After all, they were now being ruled by an undead overlord, an existence they had once been taught to dread. The unease only deepened when news spread that Momon and his companions had been forced to flee the kingdom. With their heroes gone, the people were left in a constant state of anxiety, dreading what might come next. Their fear was tempered only by one fact: Ains had yet to set foot in the kingdom itself. He remained in Nazarick, governing from afar, biding his time. He understood that stepping in too soon could fracture what little stability remained. So instead, he waited for the right moment to appear before them, not as a tyrant, but as a ruler worthy of respect. After some thought, Rex teleported away. Moments later, he appeared inside a frigid cell, its air bitter with frost and silence. Within it sat Anteline, brought back to life and now held as a prisoner. Her situation was a complicated one. Ains hadn't decided what to do with her yet, but had been leaning toward handing her over to Demiurge, who had plans to use her on his farm. Demiurge's farm was no ordinary place. It was the foundation of a rare operation. His strange flock of sheep played a crucial role in producing magical scrolls for Nazarick. Rex, ever the visionary, had plans of his own. One day, when Nazarick was secure and thriving, he intended to evolve those sheep into gods. Rex, Anteline said in a weak, blank voice, her eyes barely registering the figure standing before her. She had seen illusions, too many over the years to count, and she couldn't be certain if this was real or just another cruel trick of her mind. Yeah, Rex replied softly, stepping closer. I came looking for you as soon as I heard what happened. Without hesitation, he reached for her chains, dispelling the bindings with a wave of his hand. Gentle light poured from his palm as he healed her, restoring both her fractured body and exhausted mind. The frost in the room clung to the air, but it couldn't mask the flicker of emotion returning to her eyes. For a brief moment, Anteline stared at him in silence. Then, with no warning, she threw a punch straight at his face. I will not listen to your lies, not again, Anteline shouted, her voice breaking through her tears. Deep down, she was screaming at herself not to believe him. He was a liar, he had always been a liar. And yet, despite knowing that, she felt powerless. Her heart, worn and fragile, still trembled at the sound of his voice. So she lashed out, throwing another punch. But what could her fist do to someone like Rex? Nothing, unless he let it, and he did. The blow landed hard against his face, not because it had power, but because Rex allowed it to. He stood still. I never lied to you, Rex said softly. 4 comments 0 vote. Chapter 21 bonus chapter for 400 PS. I never lied to you, Rex said softly. What I told you that day was something I wanted to make real. But even with all of my strength, I've always been afraid. Afraid to stop, afraid to sit still, afraid to build a life with anyone outside this guild. His words weren't proud, they weren't rehearsed, just honest, and that honesty gave Anteline pause, her raised fist trembling in the air. I will exist forever. I can't die, Rex said softly, eyes distant. Meanwhile, even if I make you immortal, there's still the chance that, down the road, something could take you from me. I'd rather run than experience the pain of watching someone I've spent years with suddenly be gone. I'd rather flee than face the way hearts can change with time. He paused, his voice trembling just slightly beneath the weight of his confession. It's cowardly, I know. But I've lived for thousands of years. I've seen too much, felt too much, to trust easily. Especially those outside this guild, but I want to. God, I want to. But I'm a coward. His eyes lowered, shame burning behind them. And in that moment, Anteline's anger faded. She looked into those pained eyes and saw not a god or a monster, but a man who had been alone for too long. Her heart softened. We're different, Anteline whispered, stepping closer and gently taking his hands in hers. Are we? Rex asked quietly, his gaze heavy with memory. I've seen the best of friends, brothers, turn on each other. I watched one shove his own kin into a stampede of wildebeests, even while the son watched his father falling to his death. That moment taught me that even the strongest bonds, no matter how pure, can crumble under the weight of time. He gently cupped Anteline's face, his thumb brushing against her cheek with a tenderness that made her breath hitch. But when I'm with you, for some reason, all those fears fade. You make me feel whole in a way no one else ever has. You bring peace to a life that's known nothing but chaos. His voice softened further, the words trembling with raw sincerity. I want you to stay by my side. And if you're willing to wait, just a little longer, I promise I'll stop running. I'll stop being a coward. I'll make you my wife. He leaned in closer, eyes locked onto hers. So, Anteline, would you do me the honor of becoming my son? The one who brightens the world, I've long forgotten how to love. Oh, of course, the answer is always yes, Anteline whispered, her voice trembling with emotion as she threw herself into Rex's arms, burying her face against his chest. Rex held her close, his hand gently rubbing her back in slow, comforting circles. Despite the warmth of the moment, his mind wandered, quietly shifting gears. I should really learn how to create talents, he thought to himself, staring past the embrace into the depths of possibility. If I claim the power to give and take talents, then I need to be able to forge them, form them from scratch. Especially if they can influence job classes. That connection could be game-changing. His fingers paused for a moment, then resumed their motion, grounding himself in the present. I still don't get your job classes. One lets you control space-time, another lets you control forces and matter, and the last one, is it a fusion of the two? Ains asked, glancing down at his temporary human form. Thanks to the world item Rex had left behind, the Book of Transformation, Ains had taken on a human appearance. The price? Losing all his original powers to fully inherit the abilities of whoever he transformed into. Not really, Rex mumbled, his eyes half-lidded as he lounged on the couch, barely awake. Even though it might look like Limitless grants control over space-time, it's more accurate to say it only covers space. He yawned, shifting positions as he continued. Vector Monarch lets me control just about everything in reality, matter, energy, even magic. But it stops at things like souls or spiritual stuff. Anything without form or structure, like a debuff spell, completely bypasses it. Alex Singularity lets me control reality itself, space, time, matter, magic, energy, forces, powers, souls, even reality as a whole, Rex said casually. I'm basically a god. The only real limit is that I'm not all-knowing. Ains slowly nodded, piecing everything together. Which is why you need the Dragon Emperor. And Anteline, you want to study them both. Exactly, Rex replied with a quiet hum as he rose to his feet, stretching slightly. It's been a few days since he freed Anteline, and currently, she is at the Sorcerer Kingdom, helping Ains manage the kingdom. I'm going to capture the Dragon Emperor, Rex said, his voice calm and lazy. I've got a feeling that once I become a primordial, I'll be able to travel the multiverse. And since you're already planning to conquer this world, why not conquer everything out there? He smiled, eyes gleaming with ambition. Who would make a better ruler than you? Ains was caught off guard. Of all the things he expected Rex to say, joining in on-world domination wasn't one of them. Who's more fitting than an undead who sees all life as equal? Rex continued. An undead who holds no worldly desires, no hunger for wealth or power, and other stuff. Ains stared at Rex for a long moment, his glowing eyes narrowing in deep thought. Then, slowly, he gave a single nod. You're right, maybe we can return to Earth. I'd like to clean it up, Ains said with a smile, his eyes brightening with renewed resolve. Let's do it. Let's conquer the multiverse. Let's step into the unknown, and this time, you won't be doing it alone. Then I should get to work, Rex replied with a nod. With those words, he vanished, teleporting straight into the crushing depths of the ocean, far below where any light could reach. There, hidden within a sealed dimension beneath the seabed, the Dragon Emperor was attempting to recover and evolve in peace. But that peace was shattered the moment Rex forced open the dimensional walls. The Dragon Emperor's eyes widened in horror as reality bent to admit Rex. Without hesitation, it tried to flee, primal fear surging through its vast form. But Rex simply raised his palm toward the Dragon Emperor. In that instant, all the kinetic energy in the air along the Dragon Emperor's path vanished, siphoned away by Vector Monarch. Boom! The Dragon Emperor, charging at full speed, slammed headfirst into what felt like an invisible, immovable wall. The collision sent a thunderous shockwave rippling through the dimension. Its massive skull rang from the impact, leaving it dazed and lightheaded. But that wasn't the worst part. It quickly realized it couldn't move at all. Its head, its limbs, everything was frozen in place. It was encased in an impossibly thin, yet unbreakable, barrier, like being pinned inside a glass box forged from the laws of physics themselves. There was no space to shift, no leverage to resist. It was completely, utterly trapped. All forms of motion require energy. Without energy, everything freezes, nothing moves, nothing flows. Rex spoke calmly as he walked toward the trapped dragon, his hands buried casually in his pockets. What you're seeing isn't magic or illusion. It's the air itself losing its right to move. The Dragon Emperor, still paralyzed, trembled inwardly as Rex approached, his footsteps slow, and impossibly quiet in the frozen space. Nice, right? Rex added with a small, almost amused smile. Unlike those so-called six gods, just a fragment of my power is godlike. His voice was soft, but it carried weight. Heavy, absolute, and to the Dragon Emperor, it was terrifying. Sadly, this power still has limitations, Rex said casually, his tone almost bored. For now, I need physical contact with the target to control its vector, though that's only because I haven't had the chance to truly push the limits of my ability. As he spoke, he placed his palm against the Dragon Emperor's massive body. In that instant, the barrier shattered, the Dragon Emperor was free to move again. But before it could even consider escape or retaliation, it realized something far worse, its body no longer obeyed its will. You're also a vector, Rex said with a smirk, his eyes gleaming. And the moment I touched you, I gained the right to reshape you however I want. The Dragon Emperor's primal instincts kicked in, and its magic surged outward in a desperate explosion. It tried to reclaim control, to fight back against the invisible grip tightening around its very existence. Another limitation, Rex continued, his voice calm as he walked around the frozen dragon. You're too powerful for me to control completely, at least, not without pushing myself. But if I only want to control a part of you, that's more than enough. With a single thought, Rex severed the Dragon Emperor's consciousness. Its massive body collapsed, fainting on the spot as if its mind had been flipped off like a switch. Both Vector Monarch and Limitless had their own distinct ways of overriding resistance. Take Blue, for instance, it didn't rely on physical attack stats to deal damage. Instead, it only required MP to cast. The more MP Rex had, the more tangible the concept of infinity he could force into reality. The result, damage that ignored resistance, defense, and durability, crushing anything that stood in its way with the weight of impossibility made real. Vector Monarch worked similarly. The more MP Rex had, the larger the scale of vectors he could manipulate. Picture it like this: your MP is a cup, and the C represents the vectors. If the cup is too small, it'll never move the sea, no matter how hard you try. But once the MP becomes vast enough, it doesn't just ripple the ocean, it commands it. Even the tides, currents, and depth would bend to your will. With a single thought, Rex compressed the Dragon Emperor down to the size of a bear. Its once massive form was now no larger than a beast in a cage. Without another word, Rex teleported back to Nazarick. Upon arrival, he casually tossed the dragon into a cage. He intended to observe it carefully as it went through its evolution process, curious to see just what kind of monster it would become next. One of the few things Rex had uncovered about primordial magic was that it appeared to be a fusion of three distinct forms of magic: tier magic, wild magic, and a third, unidentified type that remained elusive. He didn't know what that final component was, at least not yet. But that was fine, he had all the time in the world to uncover the truth behind that mysterious third magic. And once he did, he knew he would gain primordial magic for himself. Boom! Within the Roble Holy Kingdom, a fierce battle raged between humans and a demon. The creature stood like a nightmare carved from fire and stone, its fangs jutted from a twisted mouth, its body cloaked in jagged scales. Thick, muscular arms ended in hooked claws, flaming wings beat the air behind it, and a long, snake-like tail writhed as it carved destruction through the human forces. "Why are you attacking my people?" A voice rang out, clear, commanding, and laced with sorrow. Stepping beyond the castle gates, a young woman emerged. Her hair shimmered like strands of molten gold, cascading down her back, and her eyes, a striking shade of cyan, burned with righteous fury. She gazed upon the demihumans rampaging across the battlefield, her heart sinking at the sight. As their queen, it tore her apart to witness her people locked in such a hopeless struggle. "Why? Because it's fun," the demon growled, its voice low and cruel, as a wicked grin stretched across its scaled face. "And your little empire is far enough from the Sorcerer Kingdom, the perfect place to build my forces before I crush them." No chapters on Saturday and Sunday, but bonus chapters. I also wanted to ask you guys a question. I do plan to go into other anime worlds before stepping into Marvel or DC, one of the TV. I plan for each world to have a moment where MC gets his ass kicked. I honestly don't like him. But anyway, the question is about One Piece. One Piece has someone known as Baby 5. Should MC meet her or not? On that note, should MC be allowed to even go to One Piece? I can already picture him meeting Robin, Nami, and countless others, so, I'm asking you guys, should he? Or is that too far? 9 comments 0 vote. Chapter 22. This is Monday chapter, so read this knowing there is no chapter on Monday unless we hit 100 power stones. The words hit Calca like a blow. Her breath caught in her throat, her body frozen as the sheer cruelty of the statement sank in. The demon reached out toward her. Knights and summoned creatures rushed to intercept, blades drawn and spells cast. But their efforts were useless. Their weapons bounced off its armored hide, and their spells fizzled into nothing. To the demon, they were insects, annoying, insignificant. Its strength dwarfed them utterly. But the demon's forceful grasp closed on empty air. Its clawed hand clenched with purpose, only to find nothing. The monarch had vanished. It wasn't the only one confused. All eyes, demihuman and human alike, swept the battlefield in disbelief, trying to find where their queen had gone. Then, cutting through the silence, a panicked voice rang out. "Why, you can put me down now." Everyone turned toward the sound and froze. There, standing effortlessly with the queen in his arms, was the most handsome man any of them had ever seen. He wore loose, flowing pants and an unbuttoned shirt that revealed a sculpted, flawless physique. His hair was pure white, falling around his face like strands of moonlight, and his eyes, glowing, vibrant blue, held the calm intensity of a storm just waiting to break. "Sorry, it's not every day I get the chance to hold an angel," Rex said with a charming, enchanting smile. Calca's face turned bright red as she quickly pushed herself out of his arms, flustered by the sudden intimacy. "Rex, impossible, how did you know I was here?" The demon roared, its voice a guttural snarl of fury that burned hotter than the sun. At the sound of its wrath, all eyes turned toward Rex. Whispers rippled through the crowd. After all, everyone knew he was part of the Sorcerer Kingdom. "Because I can sense every powerful aura on the continent," Rex said with a light smile, his voice calm and effortless. "The moment I sensed an ant I used to play with, I decided to drop by, and, as expected, you're as disgusting as ever." His smile faded, replaced by a sharp, cold look of utter contempt. "Go to hell," the demon roared, opening its maw and unleashing a massive beam of fire toward Rex. Without flinching, Rex raised his hand. In an instant, he manipulated the vector of the air, redirecting the heat and pressure. The ground cracked, and the wind howled violently, but the flames never touched the bystanders. He had twisted the energy away, shielding everyone from annihilation with unmatched ease. "Hey, beautiful, mind getting everyone as far away from here as you can," Rex called out, his tone smooth yet urgent. "Also, to you demi-humans, you're free. Flee to the Sorcerer Kingdom. You'll be safe there." The demon's voice thundered through the battlefield. "If any of you move, I'll kill you." But before the threat could settle in their minds, it froze. Rex was suddenly in front of it. The demon reacted just in time, barely managing to block Rex's fist. Even so, the impact struck with such force that it was sent flying backward, skidding across the battlefield like a ragdoll caught in a storm. "Go on, you're all free now," Rex said with a charming smile, his eyes locking briefly with a female snake demi-human. Her cheeks flushed pink, but she quickly nodded and turned to flee. With her taking the lead, the rest followed, and in moments, the demihumans were running, many with tears of relief in their eyes. "Everyone, fall back," Kalka commanded, her voice firm. At her order, the loyal knights began their retreat, forming up and moving with practiced discipline. But she herself did not move. Instead, she stayed rooted in place, unable to look away from the man who had just saved her. As Rex engaged the demon in a battle so fast her eyes could barely keep up, she noticed something else. Many of the fleeing demihumans had also turned, watching the fight from a distance. They weren't just watching, they were praying for Rex to win. It wasn't the first time she had ever seen demihumans as something more than beasts. She was among a rare few humans who cared for the demi-humans, even though they were her enemies. She was considered too nice and soft by many. But Rex, he wasn't like anyone she had known. He treated both humans and demihumans the same, without even a hint of prejudice in his voice or actions. Boom! Suddenly, something crashed down from the sky with a deafening force. Dust shot up like a wave, and the ground cracked beneath the impact. Kalka's eyes widened as she looked toward the source. There, pulling himself out of a smoking crater, was Rex. He rose slowly, brushing debris off his shoulder with an irritated sigh, as if being slammed from the sky was just a minor inconvenience. "Okay, I guess I did sneak attack you that first time," Rex said with a sigh, his eyes lifting toward the sky where 7 demons floated ominously in a circle above. "But 7 on 1, really? You're Rex," one of the demons sneered, the tone dripping with mockery. "We're only showing you the respect you deserve, by going all out." As it spoke, its gaze drifted downward, locking onto Kalka. In a blur of motion, the demon vanished from its place in the sky and reappeared in front of her, scythe already swinging with deadly speed. But before the blade could reach her, Rex was there, his body moving faster than thought, placing himself between the scythe and Kalka. The weapon struck his back with a thunderous impact, yet he stood firm, shielding her with nothing but his own flesh. "Rex!" Kalka cried out in panic, her voice cracking with fear as Rex pushed her away, just in time. The blade, already drenched in his blood, had slashed through his chest, missing her by mere inches. Boom! Before the attacking demon could follow up with another strike, it was suddenly blasted backward, sent rocketing through the sky like a broken comet. A second figure had appeared without warning. Demiurge. He floated in front of Rex, his form radiating fury. His usually composed expression was twisted by uncontrollable rage as he glared at the 7 demons. "Looks like I also had backup," Rex said with a tired smirk, slumping down against the nearest wall as blood slowly soaked through his torn shirt. His chest rose and fell heavily, each breath laced with pain, but his eyes remained sharp. At that moment, figures began to emerge from the shadows. Doppelgangers, each one bearing the likeness of Shaltir, Albedo, and the other floor guardians, stepped onto the battlefield. Their sudden appearance sent a shockwave of fear through the demon. The demons didn't hesitate. They turned and fled, their pride cast aside as panic overtook them. The doppelganger of Demiurge, along with the others mimicking the floor guardians, gave silent chase, vanishing in pursuit. "Rex!" Kalka cried, rushing to his side. Her hands trembled as she began casting a healing spell, golden light pouring from her fingertips and wrapping around his wounds. It's not every day a queen personally sees to it that I'm in good condition. Must be my lucky day, Rex said with a faint smile, trying to lighten the mood despite the pain. Stop talking. You're badly injured, you're losing too much blood. Calca snapped, her voice trembling. Guilt swelled in her chest, heavier than any wound. This was all her fault. If she hadn't stayed, if she hadn't drawn his attention, maybe he wouldn't be like this. Don't worry about me. I'll heal, Rex said softly, forcing a grin despite the pain. I've got a skill that makes me pretty much immortal, so, are you single? I know it's sudden and all, but I'd regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't try to get to know the woman who just so cruelly stole my heart. Steal. Calca froze for a moment, her heart sinking as guilt stabbed through her. Was he blaming her for his wounds? But as the weight of his words sank in, her eyes widened in realization. Her face flushed bright red, and with a startled yelp, she blinked a few meters away from him in embarrassment, her hands covering her burning cheeks. What are you saying? This isn't the time for something like that. Calca yelled, her voice cracking as she tried to mask her embarrassment. But her cheeks were already bright red, and her words came out in a flustered mess. She tripped over her own sentence, clearly panicking. Her eyes widened even more when she saw Rex trying to stand, and she rushed to his side, instinctively reaching out to steady him. I'm saying I've fallen in love with you, Rex said gently, his voice soft but certain as he gently took her hand. I've never felt like this before, so please forgive me if I'm stepping out of line. It's just, these emotions are new to me. I'm overwhelmed, and the only thing I can think to do, is be honest with you about how I feel. But we just met, she said shyly, her voice barely above a whisper as she looked away, unable to meet Rex's eyes. Her cheeks burned with heat, and yet, she couldn't bring herself to pull her hand away. But I saw all I needed to see, Rex said gently. These eyes of mine, they see more than just appearances. They see the soul, and yours is the most beautiful I've ever seen. He smiled softly, brushing his thumb across the back of her hand. That alone tells me everything about you. Inside and out, you're beautiful. His words struck her speechless. Calca stood there, speechless, her heart racing from something far more dangerous than fear. Oh, I just realized, I never introduced myself, Rex said with a light laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm Rex Tempest. Alongside Ains Ulgaun, I serve as one of the kings of the Sorcerer Kingdom. Though truth be told, Ains handles most of the ruling. I'm not exactly the best at leadership. He offered her a charming smile, his tone warm and easy. I'm Calca Besserez, she replied, her voice soft and slightly nervous. The Holy Queen of the Roble Holy Kingdom. It's a pleasure to meet you, Sir Rex Tempest. Her cheeks were still tinged with pink as she lowered her gaze, unable to keep the fluttering in her chest at bay. Oh, I also forgot, kings can't just enter another person's land without permission, can they? Rex said with a sheepish smile, glancing around awkwardly. There's so much political stuff to keep track of, do I, pay a fine or something? His confusion was genuine, and the sight made Calca laugh softly. For all his overwhelming strength and power, she hadn't expected him to be so clueless about something so basic. It was adorable, even more so when she caught the faint blush rising to his cheeks as he realized she was laughing at his flustered state. Meanwhile, back in Nazarick, Albedo, Demiurge, and all the floor guardians stood gathered beside Ains, watching the scene unfold through magical projection. What were they watching? Rex, winning the heart of a queen. Lord Rex's skills are truly unmatched, Demiurge said slowly, his tone filled with reverent astonishment. I had believed we would need several months, perhaps more, to win their loyalty. Yet it seems a single day in his hands was more than enough. His gaze remained fixed on the magical projection, where the scene continued to unfold. Rex, effortlessly charming and powerful, had just swayed the heart of the Holy Queen. It was a feat few could have even imagined, let alone executed with such ease. Demiurge threw a look at Ains, who seemed to be lost in thought. Ains sat silently, his fingers steepled before his mouth. He had been watching everything, not just through magic, but through foresight and careful calculation. Why had he ordered no invasion of the Roble Holy Kingdom? Why had he been so focused on gathering intel on the demi-humans? Because from the beginning, it had all been part of his design. Rex might have been overwhelming in raw power, a walking calamity, unstoppable in battle, but Ains was something else entirely. He was foresight incarnate, the silent architect of fate. He didn't move mountains with his fists. He simply waited, watched, and placed a single stone that started an avalanche. Demiurge shuddered slightly in awe. Every time he thought he had finally understood even a fragment of Ains's grand strategy, he was immediately humbled, forced to admit that what he'd seen was only the edge of something far greater. Since when did Rex's eyes see souls? Ains thought, deadpan as he watched the display unfold before him. How does he make up such things on the spot, and make them sound convincing? Though baffled, Ains couldn't help but be impressed. Rex had a frightening talent for manipulation. His manipulation was off the charts. Ains was sure he could gaslight a blind woman into thinking she wasn't blind. Honestly, with someone like Rex on their side, would they really face any resistance in taking over the world? Nations would fall, hearts would crumble, and empires would kneel, all under that maddening smile and effortless charisma. But then came the real issue. The difficult part wasn't world domination. It was what came after. Because if there was one thing Rex was consistently terrible at, it was being a good boyfriend. 5 comments 0 vote. Chapter 23. A.N. No chapter tomorrow, and the day after. But I shall bless you all with a long chapter. Over the past few years, the Dragon Empire had been locked in a brutal war with the Beastman nation. As the population of Beastmen surged, food became rare, and their chosen prey was humanity. War became inevitable. For the Dragon Empire, this wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a desperate struggle against extinction. Overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of the Beastmen, the Dragon Empire found itself on the back foot, teetering on the brink of collapse. Forced into a corner, they turned to the slain theocracy and various other powerful nations, pleading for support. And the support they received. No one was eager to face the full force of the Beastmen should the Dragon Empire fall. If that last line of defense broke, the rest of the world would find itself staring down the teeth and claws of an unstoppable horde. So, for now, everyone lent a hand, not out of kindness but fear. Currently, on one of the many active battlefields, a breathtaking sight was making its way forward, a white-haired woman, graceful and unbothered, walking calmly across the war-torn land. She wore nothing but simple clothing, yet her radiance outshone even the gleam of polished armor. Her long snow-white hair fluttered gently with each step, and her piercing blue eyes held a casual confidence that made hearts falter. Her figure was nothing short of divine, so perfect that the soldiers around her, despite knowing full well she was royalty, forgot all decorum and stared with shameful, lustful gazes. She didn't care. In fact, she smirked at their reactions. This was the norm. Of course, lesser beings would look at her that way, how could they not? She was perfection incarnate. It wasn't arrogance, it was simply fact. Even her half-siblings, Momin, Michael, and the rest who followed behind her, couldn't deny it. As much as it pained them, they had to accept the truth. She was simply better than they in every conceivable way. And why, you might ask? Because she was just that amazing. Arrogant piece of. Makoto quickly cut Michael off, placing a hand on his arm to stop him from saying more. Michael clicked his tongue in frustration but didn't push him away. The truth was clear, many of them already disliked this new sibling. And it wasn't without reason. She reminded them too much of Rex. That smug expression, the effortless confidence, the overwhelming presence, she had inherited almost everything from him. She wasn't just powerful, she was monstrous. Limitless, vector monarch, eyes of infinity, she possessed them all. On top of that, she wielded tear magic, wild magic, and even a rare talent. The wild magic alone was unfair, but the way she carried herself, like the world owed her admiration, made it worse. They had tried to fight her once. It wasn't even a contest. She had defeated all of them, except for Momin, with terrifying ease. Only he managed to put up a fight, and even then, it was thanks to his gear, which for some reason seemed to suppress or outright negate the effects of Rex's powers. Her pride couldn't take the lose. The fact that someone like Momin, trash in her eyes, had managed to defeat her was infuriating beyond belief. How dare he, someone so beneath her, stand above a god? The humiliation festered deep in her chest like a poison. To vent her growing rage, she had made her way to the battlefield, heading straight toward the area reported to have the most resistance. Humans, just submit already. An aged voice rang out with authority. An old man, demi-human with flowing white hair and piercing blue eyes, stood at the front lines. With a single motion, he extended his palm and activated blue, his control of spatial force evident in the pulsing energy. A torrent of gravitational force surged outward, warping the air and threatening to crush everything in its path. Dozens of soldiers were caught in its pull, but their wild magic-enhanced shields held, barely. Some managed to dig their heels into the dirt, resisting the force with every ounce of strength they had. Others weren't so lucky. Dragged into the core of the spell, they were crushed mercilessly under the weight of infinity itself, collapsed into nothing, as if the world simply folded them out of existence. Momen, Michael, and the others stood frozen at the sight. Moments like this reminded them just how terrifying their father truly was. Even the demi-humans weren't immune to the influence of his words. The old man, clearly a cat demi-human, had lived far beyond the average for his kind. Most barely reached 60, and by the look of him, he was well into that range. That placed him around the same age as Makoto, making it painfully clear, he was one of them. "Do we kill him?" Michael muttered with unease. He hesitated, the weight of fratricide settling on his shoulders. But before anyone could answer, the princess simply raised her hand and snapped her fingers. Snap! A sharp burst of sound exploded from the snap, compressed into a narrow wave that shot straight toward the old man. The invisible force struck him dead on, destroying his brain in an instant. His body crumpled lifelessly to the ground, the deed done with terrifying ease, without remorse, without hesitation. "I hope you weren't seriously asking me such a foolish question," the princess said with a light smile, though her words dripped with cold disdain. "Over the past 100 years, I've killed more half-siblings than you've ever even met." The casual brutality of her statement left them all stunned. "Our father's blood is too powerful," she continued, her voice smooth and arrogant. "Every child he sires is born with the limitless, well, almost every child." She threw a sharp, withering look at Momen, her tone now laced with venom. Unlike the trash standing over there. Her grudge was clear as day, she still hadn't gotten over the fact that Momen had defeated her. And judging by the scorn in her eyes, she never would. "Anyway, to keep my people and the city safe, I usually have to kill those who run around playing at being thieves, murderers, rapists, and whatever else they think they can get away with," she said casually, like it was no more than a chore. "We hold the power of gods, and those who still act like the mortals we stand above should be put down like the dogs they are." As she spoke, she reached out and rubbed the head of a young soldier who'd been standing nearby, listening in. The way she patted him wasn't affectionate, it was patronizing, like one might stroke a loyal pet. The young man said nothing, enjoying the pat. If he had a tail, it would be wagging at this moment. The sight made Makoto's eyes narrow. He said nothing, but the tension in his posture spoke volumes. Still, he bit back the words burning on his tongue. This wasn't his place to speak. "Anyway, let me finish this war. If that old man existed, then there might be others like him hiding deeper within the Beastman country," she said lightly, her voice calm and unshaken. With a simple snap of her fingers, the surrounding vectors twisted and surged forward like invisible blades. In an instant, the force unleashed by that gesture tore through the battlefield, cutting down hundreds of beastmen without mercy. She strolled forward, unhurried and composed, her expression unreadable as she stepped over the carnage. Lifeless bodies littered the earth, yet her steps never faltered. Still, something faint flickered in her gaze, a trace of thoughtfulness buried beneath the apathy. After all, if her half-siblings had been waging this war for years, that meant she'd failed her people in some way. She had ignored their suffering, distanced herself from the conflict, and allowed them to fight a hopeless battle without her. As a god, she wasn't supposed to descend into the realm of mortals to fight their battles. But if another god dared to interfere and she chose not to respond, that would be far too shameful. So she moved without hesitation, slaughtering every beastman she encountered with a simple snap of her finger. The cheers of the soldiers meant nothing to her, she didn't acknowledge them, didn't slow her stride. Soon, her path led her deep into the land of the demi-beasts, a place wrapped in thick vegetation and shadows. As she advanced, she began to sense familiar presences, her siblings. She followed the trail through dense trees until her eyes caught movement in the darkness. "Brother, look, this girl looks just like great-grandmother," a small voice called from the canopy. The princess raised her head slightly. Nestled among the branches and the twisting webs, spider demi-humans peered down at her. They had the upper bodies of humans, youthful and curious, but their lower halves were that of spiders, and there were thousands of them. Stupid. Why do you think they let us eat her and not the others? A woman snapped, her voice sharp with frustration. Hunger gnawed at them constantly. The rules were strict, they couldn't just devour any beast they pleased, and that restriction had driven many to madness. They were starving, forced to feed on each other just to survive. But now, finally, they were allowed to feast, and she was the chosen prey. Let's crush her before anything else, another spider demi-human hissed. To the princess's surprise, she saw the horde move in eerie coordination. Every one of them, hundreds, maybe thousands, began to cast blue. She felt the mana shift instantly. They didn't possess the eyes of infinity, so naturally, they couldn't summon the spell alone. But in such overwhelming numbers, united with deadly teamwork, they could mimic the impossible. And now, that impossible was aimed straight at her. She snapped her fingers in horror, and in that instant, every single spider demi-human was annihilated. The sound was crisp, but the aftermath was devastating. Their bodies crumpled in unison, as if the very concept of life had been erased from them. Had she hesitated, had she let them finish casting blue, she would have been obliterated on the spot. Troublesome, she muttered in annoyance, her voice cold and sharp. It was now clear that what lay ahead wouldn't be simple or straightforward. These were not ordinary enemies. Still, without pause, she stepped forward, her posture unwavering, radiating divine authority. Behind her, Momin and the others followed from a distance, quietly watching. None spoke. They simply observed, uneasy with the power she wielded so effortlessly, and the deadly skills with which she wielded it. As they walked, they encountered countless members of their extended family, dog demi-humans, snake demi-humans, lion demi-humans, the list seemed endless. It was as if their father had made it his personal mission to sleep with every kind of demi-human in existence. And the results were staggering. The further they went, the more absurd it became. Wolf demi-humans, tiger demi-humans, even tree spirits. Each new face they passed seemed to confirm a wild, almost mythical truth: their father had no limits. It raised a troubling question: how were the birth rates so unbelievably high? Surely his seed didn't have a 100% success rate. That would defy logic. Surely there had to be some sort of limit to this kind of thing, but all signs pointed to the contrary. And sadly, the list just kept going. Soon, they arrived at the heart of the beast man country, and there, waiting for them, stood a lone bear demi-human. But upon seeing him, the princess halted for the first time. She stared in silence as the sleeping demi-human slowly stirred awake. His movements were sluggish, as if even opening his eyes was a struggle. Then, the moment he looked up, she saw it: white hair and striking blue eyes. "You guys must be my half-siblings," he mumbled, voice heavy with drowsiness. He was clearly exhausted, barely managing to stay awake just to speak with them. "I came to kill you all. From what I sense, you're the last half-sibling here," the princess said coldly, her voice echoing through the silent clearing. "Yeah, I figured as much," the bear demi-human replied, slowly rising to his feet as the last remnants of sleep slipped from his eyes. "I was hungry and ate some of them. They tasted better than the others." He stretched his limbs, cracking his neck casually as if the topic didn't weigh on him at all. "I tried to set up some rules, something to stop them from killing each other while I slept. Thought maybe, when I woke up, I'd have one or two left to eat." A tired smile curled across his face. But little of them remained by that point. "Honestly, I never pictured my father as a human, but it seems about right. I missed the taste of my siblings. I wonder, since you're human, would you taste even better?" The bear demi-human murmured darkly. A hungry grin curled across his face as he controlled his own vectors. In the blink of an eye, he vanished, reappearing in front of the princess with terrifying speed. His sharp claws came crashing down toward her like falling stars. Boom! A deafening explosion shook the earth as smoke and dust surged outward. Momin's heart dropped. Without thinking, he burst forward in a panic, quickly joined by the others. They dove into the dust cloud, ready to land the princess their support. But before they could react further, both the princess and the bear demi-human were sent flying out of the cloud, crashing across the ground. Everyone froze, eyes wide with disbelief. Slowly, their heads turned toward a lone tree, where a white-haired man stood beneath its shadow. The white-haired man was beautiful. That was the only word any of them could find. Not even Rex, for all his presence and charm, could rival this man's elegance. His features were sharp and refined, with slicked-back white hair that glistened under the sunlight. Square-rimmed glasses with orange lenses framed his eyes. He wore a pristine white suit, accented with red cuffs and a matching crimson tie. Beneath it, a black shirt contrasted sharply against the clean lines of his jacket. His white trousers matched the ensemble perfectly, and his shoes, also white, were trimmed with sleek black soles that gleamed with every subtle shift. "Who are you?" the princess demanded, her voice sharp and cold. Her eyes burned with restrained fury as she glared at the newcomer. She didn't care if he turned out to be one of their half-siblings, she had always believed herself a goddess among them, one above reproach. But this man made her feel small. And that, more than anything, was something she could not stand. "Guess," he said with a teasing smile, his voice smooth and calm. But the moment lingered only briefly before an explosion of primordial magic tore through the air, catching everyone off guard. The pressure was suffocating, shaking the atmosphere itself. Without hesitation, Makoto stepped forward, placing himself between the newcomer and the others. There was no mistaking the hatred in his eyes. It was raw, the kind that simmered for years before boiling over. "You seem to have a talent that allows you to copy any spell you witness," the man said, his tone light but knowing, a ghost of amusement touching his lips. "Just like your mother." His words hung heavy in the air. He remembered Landfall well, how she could replicate even super-tier spells and bypass all of the requirements to do so. "This time, I will not let you off," Makoto said coldly, his voice laced with conviction. It was only then that the others finally realized the truth. The man standing before them was Rex. The revelation left them stunned. He looked nothing like the Rex they remembered. Gone was his usual appearance, replaced by something far more composed, refined, and distant. "I didn't come all this way to fight," Rex said lightly. "Instead, I've come to understand something important. There's a difference between freedom and being irresponsible." As he snapped his fingers, in that moment, the primordial magic Makoto had copied from the Dragon Emperor vanished. His talent, sealed in an instant. With another snap of his fingers, every one of Rex's children suddenly found themselves seated in chairs arranged neatly before him. None of them knew how or when the chairs had appeared, but they were there all the same. As for Rex, he casually sat down in his own chair, which materialized beneath him as if the world itself bent to his will. "I'm willing to give you two options when coming here," Rex began, his tone calm and unshaken. "One is to erase the problem, meaning I slaughter every last one of you. The second is for all of you to join my guild, as soldiers. There is a third option," he added, his voice dipping ever so slightly, "but I doubt any of you would find it agreeable." "Fuck you. You made my life hell." Mia screamed, her voice trembling with years of rage. Just remembering how her own mother had despised her, how she tried to sell her off as a slave because of Rex, made her blood boil. She hated him down to her very bones. "How did I make your life hell? I wasn't even there," Rex replied with a bewildered expression, completely caught off guard by the accusation. But his confusion only lit the fuse. In the next moment, the group erupted in anger as one by one, the others joined in, their curses and shouts crashing over him in a tidal wave of resentment. Rex sat there, utterly speechless. A small black flash as to why our beloved MC suddenly changed. 10 comments 0 vote. Download the app for greater interaction. You can chat with me about my writing experience apart from the comments section. Itachi 1010. Download app now. Chapter 24. I was bored. "You called?" Rex asked, appearing beside Ains in a flash, having just returned from the Roble Holy Kingdom. His voice held a trace of irritation. After all, Ains's panic had interrupted him right before he was about to sleep with a princess. To say he was cock-blocked would be putting it mildly. "I've noticed a problem, something that could become a threat to Nazarick if left unchecked," Ains said seriously, his tone grave enough to make Rex pause, one brow lifting in quiet curiosity. Without another word, Ains waved his hand, conjuring a floating screen. The image that appeared showed Momon, Makoto, and the others locked in battle with the princess of the Dragon Empire. "At first, I believed only you could possess Vector Monarch," Ains began, his voice calm but edged with concern. But clearly, that's not the case. And what about apex singularity? I'd like to assume the name implies exclusivity, that only you could wield such a class, yet Antoline's existence suggests otherwise. Rex fell silent, his gaze narrowing slightly as he focused on the image of the Dragon Empire's princess, studying her more intently than before. She also has a talent, Ains continued. And according to her, no one is worthy enough to make her use it. Think about that. Your children can inherit limitless, eyes of infinity, vector monarch, talents, and if that wasn't enough, they carry your blood. He paused, his tone growing heavier. And the worst part, they're born under circumstances that push them to hate you. Ains didn't bother hiding the worry in his voice. For once, his mask of composure cracked, just enough to show how seriously he was taking this. I understand what you're saying, Rex said softly, the weight of Ains's words finally settling on him. A quiet awareness flickered in his eyes as he imagined a future where one of his own children might rise against him, a Kratos born not of fate, but of his own negligence. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. But I want to be free, he admitted, his voice light but distant. The real reason I don't stick around, even when I genuinely like the girl, it's because that's not the kind of responsibility I'm looking for. With that, Rex turned away and slowly walked up the steps leading to the throne. He sat down heavily, lost in his thoughts, letting the silence fill the space around him as he wrestled with a truth he didn't want to face. But Ains Ulgaun is my home. I can't really ignore the fact that my own actions are creating risks to it, Rex said lightly, his voice carrying a note of reluctant clarity before he let out a quiet sigh. I never understood why you wanted to be free so much, Ains said after a pause, settling into the seat beside him. Rex chuckled softly. Well, because I saw just how suddenly and senselessly someone can die. One moment, a person can be perfectly happy, alive and breathing, and the next, their blood is splattered across the ground. Rex spoke softly, his gaze distant, haunted by the image of his father from his first life, whose body had simply exploded before his eyes. I refuse to be that powerless. I won't leave my fate to chance, to the chaos of the world. My fate belongs to me alone, which means I should live how I want, without bowing to the morals of society. His voice hardened as he looked down at his open palms. Morals are just constructs, invented by humans to control one another. In my eyes, humans are born selfish and cruel, they have to be taught about human rights, and about equality. So if I'm truly free, why should I follow their rules? Why not create my own? Ains sat in silence, the weight of Rex's words settling over him. He hadn't expected Rex to have such an outlook on life. He did everything for the simple reason, he didn't care for society rules. I don't care about my children, Rex said flatly, his tone devoid of remorse. Society claims that because they carry my blood, I'm supposed to give a damn, but I don't. I never have. I've never felt even the slightest urge to try, and I don't see why I should start now. He stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Round them up and kill them, he said, as if giving a simple order. I'm going to find the root of this. Clearly, the way I've been doing things is wrong, something has to change. That's a bit too far, Ains said in shock. It was almost ironic, an undead, supposedly devoid of emotion, feeling more concern for Rex's children than their own father did. Yet here he was, speaking up on their behalf. Let's see if some want to join Nazarick, Ains began, but he didn't get the chance to finish. Rex cut him off. Yeah, as a soldiers. It would be wasteful to throw away resources that could be useful to us. Nice thinking, Rex said with a nod, his voice calm and calculated. Ains sighed quietly, as that wasn't the angle he had been aiming for at all. They are your children, Ains reminded him, his tone edged with quiet concern as he watched Rex casually walk away. He didn't say more, but deep down, he feared a future where Rex might look back on this moment, and feel the sting of regret far too late. My only children are in the guild. I chose them, unlike those things that were forced upon me, Rex said, not bothering to look back as he made his way out of the throne room heading to his room for a long overdue moment of reflection. In the back of his mind, the princess's use of Vector Monarch flashed through his thoughts. The way she snapped her fingers, it stirred a memory, one of an anime he had watched back in his past life. Someone else had moved like that once. He entered his room and quietly sat before the full-body mirror, staring at his reflection. For a long while, he simply looked, as if trying to see something deeper in the image staring back. Why should I follow society's rules? Just because they say not loving your own child is wrong, that makes me the villain? Rex asked, staring into the mirror with a deep frown. What was so terrible about not caring for your children? Responsibility. To him, it was just a hollow idea, a concept built by others to chain those too weak to think for themselves. Rex rejected all of it. As the apex of all lifeforms, why should he follow rules created by lesser beings? That made no sense to him at all. From his first life onward, he had trained relentlessly, devouring every skill and power he could find, clawing his way up to the pinnacle of existence. And now, standing at that peak, he had the freedom to do anything, to be anyone, to shape his path without constraint. Was that not what everyone claimed to dream of? But Rex understood that with such overwhelming power came isolation. To counter that, he chose his friends carefully. Yet even their presence wasn't enough to deter his obsession with strength. He kept climbing higher, kept chasing more power, because to seize control of his fate, to bend destiny to his will, had always been his dream. Now, though, he had to face an uncomfortable truth: he might one day give birth to someone powerful enough to kill him. I need to create my own laws to follow, Rex muttered, dragging his hand through his disheveled hair. With that simple motion, his appearance shifted, his hair smoothing itself into a slicked-back white style, as if mirroring the clarity of the resolve now settling in his heart. First things first, I will not let anything that could harm my home stand, Rex said firmly, watching as his clothing began to shift and reshape around him. If he was maturing, then his appearance should reflect that evolution. Second, I've yet to become the strongest being out there. How could I have been so reckless? He muttered, his voice low with realization. From now on, my actions must serve the benefit of Nazarick. With that, he conjured a pair of glasses and slid them on with a sharp flick of his hand. A light smirk played at the corners of his lips as he met his reflection in the mirror, sharper, colder, more handsome. Then, without another word, he vanished. Flashback end. You're a real piece of shit. You dare to break my mother's heart, I'll kill you. The princess screamed, thrashing against Rex's invisible hold. But no matter how hard she struggled, it was pointless. Rex didn't flinch. His gaze was indifferent, his voice sharper than any blade. I don't care. That sounds like her problem. How is it my fault if her heart's broken? He said with a disdainful sneer, looking at her as if she were nothing more than an annoyance. I have zero feels for any of you, Rex said coldly. Let's, for a moment, entertain the illusion that it was all my fault, that your mothers were heartbroken because of me. So what? What did they do about it? Over all those countless years, how many times did they waste their thoughts on someone who never gave a damn about them? His voice cut like a blade, eyes narrowed with pure disdain. The children wanted to speak, to shout back, but Rex had already taken away their ability to talk. They could only sit there in silence, forced to listen. How many years have you spent thinking about someone who wouldn't even blink if you dropped dead? He asked, his tone dripping with contempt. You've shackled yourselves to that pain. For what? To kill me, I, the being you claim to hate so deeply, and yet, I still hold that much weight in your hearts. His scorn deepened, but then he paused. His gaze shifted to Michael, whose body trembled slightly. Around him, the vectors in the air twisted unnaturally, responding to the chaos of his emotions, wild, raw, and unstable. Oh, shut up, Rex said with open disgust. If I wasn't living rent-free in your head all this time, maybe then you would have known, your mother is still alive. Michael froze. At first, he didn't believe it. But then, with trembling focus, he extended his senses, scanning for that familiar presence he hadn't felt in years. And then, he found it. A familiar aura. Tears began to slip down his cheeks. I'll give you all one chance, Rex said, his voice sharp and final. Submit and join the guild, or else. There will be no second chances after this moment. With a snap of his fingers, he released their silenced voices. But before anyone could speak, Mia spat, fury burning in her eyes. The spit didn't fall gently to the floor, it shot forward like a bullet, aimed straight for Rex. Rex simply tilted his head to the side, effortlessly avoiding the spit without so much as a flinch. At the same time, he snapped his fingers. Instantly, Mia let out a gut-wrenching scream as pain surged through her body, deep, invasive, and unrelenting. Her very genetics were being rewritten. You hate me so much. Rex said coldly, his voice devoid of emotion. Then I'll do you a favor. I'll erase myself from your bloodline. You'll be remade, reborn, as if your mother had laid with someone of her own caliber. Before their eyes, Mia's white hair darkened to a rich, ordinary brown. Her sharp features softened, her figure subtly shifting to reflect the transformation. Whatever traces of Rex had once been in her were now completely gone. Her strength collapsed in an instant. Her mana vanished completely, and her physical prowess plummeted to match her now ordinary limits. And no, Mia whispered, staring at her trembling hand in disbelief. Everything felt dull, empty. The vibrant world she once knew had faded to gray. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 25. And no, Mia whispered, staring at her trembling hand in disbelief. Everything felt dull, empty. The vibrant world she once knew had faded to gray. The Eye of Infinity hadn't just given her power, it had given her perception entirely beyond human levels. She could once see colors beyond mortal comprehension, feel things others couldn't begin to imagine. Her senses had transcended normal boundaries. And now she was nothing, just a normal person, stripped bare of everything that once set her apart. Why aren't you happy? I'm no longer your father. I can even make it so you return home and live a normal life, as if your mother had never met me, Rex said coldly, his voice devoid of warmth. Mia stood frozen, her eyes fixed on her trembling hands. The change was undeniable, her strength, her mana, the heightened senses she'd once known, all gone. The world felt dull now, muted in ways she couldn't describe. She didn't just feel weaker, she felt smaller, invisible in a reality she no longer understood. No one dared to speak. Horror clung to the air like a fog, stifling every breath. Trash, Rex muttered, resting his chin against his fist, eyes narrowed with disgust. For all that hate you held, I was still the best thing that ever happened to you. His words cut deeper than any blade, but could they say to that? For in a way it was true. But I am a father, he said, cold and matter of fact. Beg me, and I'll return the gift I gave you the day you were born. Slowly, and shakily, Mia fell from her chair, collapsing onto her knees. Tears streamed down her cheeks as her hands trembled, pressing weakly against the cold floor. Her head hung low, hair hiding her face as she broke beneath the weight of it all. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking with each word. She tried to hold herself together, to maintain even a shred of dignity, but it was useless. The tears wouldn't stop, not when her entire world had shattered. She would rather die than live as an ordinary human. This was hell. To fall from being an untouchable being, one who soared above the rest, to suddenly being nothing, just another fragile soul among the masses, it was unbearable. With a snap of his fingers, Mia's body was restored. Her power returned, her senses reignited, and her strength surged back into her veins. But even then, she didn't calm down. She remained frozen, too terrified that Rex might take it all away again on a whim. Her breathing was shallow, her body trembling despite being whole once more. You'll serve as a soldier under Cocytus, but that's a matter for later, Rex said coldly, his gaze sweeping across the others. Should I assume the rest of you refuse to become soldiers as well? No one answered. Instead, in silent understanding, they all lowered their heads. Learn to be grateful. Everything you are today is because of me, Rex said coldly. Momin, let's go. You no longer need to waste your time with them. At his words, all eyes turned to Momin. But to their shock, his gear shimmered and vanished, revealing Pandora's actor beneath the armor. Without hesitation, he knelt before Rex, eyes filled with unwavering respect. They stared in disbelief. None of them had expected this. Pandora's actor had been working for Rex all along. With Rex's silent nod of approval, Pandora's actor rose to his feet and calmly walked toward a glowing gate that Rex had summoned. All of you now have one mission: find more of your siblings and bring them into the army. Do it well, and I may consider giving your mother a chance. Perhaps, just perhaps, she and I could work things out. That, I swear upon my name, Rex Tempest. With those final words, Rex stepped through the portal, Pandora's actor following silently behind him. Makoto remained seated, staring down at his palm, his expression distant and hollow. A tremble ran through his fingers. He couldn't hide it, he was scared. Without Rex, how could his mother, a vampire, ever bring forth life? The truth gnawed at him. Without his father, he was nothing. And today, his pride, once so fierce, was shattered beyond repair, leaving behind nothing but a quiet, unrelenting emptiness. Quote. The princess scanned each of them in silence before her eyes drifted to the bare demi-human she had been about to fight only moments ago. Without another word, she vanished, teleporting away, unwilling to let anyone see the tears gathering in her eyes. Never in her life had she felt so helpless, so powerless. The emotions were raw, foreign, and overwhelming. And worse, she hated herself for it. How could a goddess shed tears? How could someone who stood above all allow herself to break? Yet deep down, she knew the truth. She wasn't a goddess. Not really. 99% of everything she was, her strength, her gifts, her job class, had come from him. From her father. And in the shadow of Rex Tempest, she was nothing. The others weren't any different. They each carried their own pride, even if none of them wore it so openly. But now that pride was gone, shattered beneath the weight of his indifference. They were soldiers now, nothing more. Bound to follow orders not by loyalty, but by fear. Time passed, and in the blink of an eye, 7 months had gone by since the guild had arrived in this new world, and already, the landscape was changing. The world was slowly falling under the control of the Sorcerer Kingdom. By now, many kingdoms had been reduced to mere vassals, their sovereignty traded away for survival. It had all started with the Baharuth Empire. After daring to invade the fake Nazarick that Ains had constructed, they were quickly humbled. Forced to apologize, they had no choice but to swear fealty and become the first official vassal state of the Sorcerer Kingdom. With that power move, Ains then declared that Carne village would fall under the rule of the Sorcerer Kingdom. Naturally, the Re-Estais Kingdom didn't take it lightly. They couldn't simply allow a piece of their territory to be claimed without resistance, pride and politics wouldn't permit it. So, when the time came for the annual war between the Baharuth Empire and the Re-Estais Kingdom, everything changed. Ains himself stepped forward, with nothing more than a simple spell, not even a super tier spell like in the anime, he slaughtered thousands on the battlefield in an instant. The Re-Estais Kingdom, horrified by the overwhelming gap in power, had no choice but to submit. Their pride shattered, they bowed to Ains's might. As for the Dragon Empire, it too fell into line. It became a vassal state when Rex accepted the Dragon Queens, to be her husband in name only. Rex, ever the enigma, honored his word. He didn't mind forging a political bond, especially one that strengthened the Sorcerer Kingdom's influence. And with the knowledge that he would likely never see the Dragon Queen again given enough time, it was a small price to pay. Total number of kills to take over the world. Roughly 100,000. Difficulty. Laughably easy. Honestly, it could have been done in just a few days. Through it all, the true might of Nazarick was never even called upon. Not once did they need to unleash their full power. And yet, the army of the Sorcerer Kingdom continued to grow at an unstoppable pace. With all the dragons now serving under Nazarick's banner, the demi-humans completely conquered, and resistance wiped out, the world had fallen into place. The Sorcerer Kingdom had become something unprecedented, a land where all races could live under one banner, united not by fear, but by order. There was no racism, no discrimination, only the unshakable rule of a kingdom built upon overwhelming power, and the will of its supreme rulers. But things didn't stop there. The undead were now a common sight across the lands. They patrolled the streets day and night as tireless guards. Farmers rented undead laborers to till their fields, haul supplies, and perform grueling work without rest or complaint. What was once a horrifying force, feared and shunned by all, had become something relied upon, an indispensable part of everyday life. The undead were no longer monsters, they were tools, servants, and sometimes even protectors. Gained a new stat. WP. Suddenly, a nullification screen pulsed before Rex, who was being engulfed in a torrent of swirling primordial energy. What was happening, you might ask? The answer was simple. After 7 long months of relentless effort and obsessive study, Rex had finally done it. He had grasped primordial magic. No, shouldn't be called primordial magic, as that didn't suit the magic. Like the system said, it was world magic. Why? Simple. Because world magic wasn't a fusion of tier magic, wild magic, and an unknown third type of magic, that had been Rex's mistake. He had assumed it was a blend, mainly because world magic could draw from both HP and MP as energy sources. But in truth, its primary power came from something else entirely. It drew in energy directly from the world itself, and Rex named that energy source WP, or world points. When the primordial dragon first reached out with its magic, something had gripped it and dragged itself into this world using that energy. The result, the primordial dragon was drained, left in a weakened state as nearly all its WP had been consumed. To recover, it had no choice but to begin absorbing WP from its surroundings again. This was also why, in its weakened state, it was forced to rely on HP and MP in place of WP when casting world magic. Without WP, it had to substitute its own life force and magical energy just to activate its spells. Anyway, after uncovering the truth, Rex realized he needed to learn how to connect to the world itself, how to become one with it. That understanding led to the formation of a new stat, WP, world points. It was the final piece to mastering world magic. But of course, Rex didn't stop there. Why settle for mastering one form of magic when he could attempt to fuse all three? Tier magic, wild magic, and world magic. Unfortunately, that was far easier said than done. The paths were too different, the energies too unstable when combined. Ready? Rex asked as he turned to face Ains and the others. They all nodded in unison, their gazes fixed forward toward a new world that awaited. The current one had become far too easy, too weak, and not nearly as fun anymore, mostly because Rex had skyrocketed everyone's power to such absurd levels. Hear me, O ring of teleportation, vessel of boundless passage. By the blessing etched upon you, awaken thy sacred might. Transcend the chains of distance, defy the limits of realm and reason. Open the gateway to the world where thought is born and echoes unbound. Let all of reality bend, and from the furthest reach of reaction. Tear through the veil, and deliver me there. Rex chanted, as a ring floated before him. Using up his HP, MP, and WP. His blessing took effect, reshaping the ring into a huge gate, a gate to another world. I got bored with the Overlord verse because they're just too overpowered. So I'm looking for a new verse, hopefully one close to, or not too far from, planet-destroying level beings. But if that can't be helped, then whatever. By the way, at his peak, the MC is a city destroyer, which, shockingly, puts him around the same level as Gojo. The Overlord verse is equal in destructive power but makes up for it with their many skills and spells, many of which bypass durability and similar defenses. Anyway, I'll put a list of worlds I want you guys to vote on. You can ignore the extra words and power levels of each world, I plan to avoid outright using such scaling in the story. 7 Deadly Sins. This is a verse with planet-level beings like Behemoth, who threaten to tear the demon realm apart with its scream. Everyone else scaling off of that would put them at the planetary level. Naruto. Early Naruto caps at mountain level, being generous. By Shippuden, it's solar system level to those who believe Kagaya's attack was going to destroy her dimension, which I don't. But honestly, I don't really care. Bleach. This is honestly the perfect verse to enter, since it's filled with a lot of hacks. Its power cap ranges from star level to universal, depending on how big you think the worlds are. My Hero Academia. This verse caps at continental, being generous. Honestly, I don't like it due to the lack of hacks abilities and no real counters to Overlord tier spells like Grasp Heart, Reality Slash, and others. Plus, flight is rare in that world, so I don't think it's a good fit. One Piece. This verse caps at planetary, shocking, right? I say this mainly thanks to Whitebeard, who is said to be able to destroy the world. Ignoring that, there are islands in the world the size of real-world continents. Add Luffy's final attack against Kaido, the sheer scale of it, and I'd say it was a multi-continent level attack. Since Luffy keeps growing, I think it's safe to believe Whitebeard's claim of being able to destroy the world is true. Fairy Tail. I did some research and found that this verse caps at planetary, mainly because there was a dragon who had the power to shrink the moon, and she was around the same power level as Acnologia, so yeah. JoJo. A safe verse, but too weak overall. It's mostly filled with hacks, which Rex and the others could easily overcome. For example, stopping time isn't a big deal since, as Ains said in the anime, once a player is a high enough level, time stop becomes nothing special. High School DxD. Honestly, I'm scared all the females would end up pregnant. Anyway, this world caps at planetary. Though I keep seeing people online saying it's multiversal, I looked into it and it seems to come from the novels. Something about Issei being stronger than countless infinity blasters from the Diabola's dragon god. I have no idea who that is, so I'll ignore it. John Wick. Honestly, this verse is too overpowered. John Wick would one-shot the MC, so let's stay away from this verse. Danmachi. This verse seems safe, but once you realize that the gods are stated to be able to destroy the world, it suddenly bumps it up to planetary level. Still, it gives me the freedom to do whatever I want, I just don't know too much about the verse yet. Record of Ragnarok. This verse seems to cap at a mountain, and at best island level. I haven't found many people claiming otherwise. Plus, I hate this anime. The fights are cool and all, but watching someone go from barely being able to see and react to one attack, to suddenly overwhelming that same person for no reason, it annoyed me. Poseidon losing especially bugged me, and I didn't even like Poseidon. Anyway, I don't really care which verse we go to. You guys vote, and I'll go with whatever you pick. And yes, I left out Dragon Ball, Marvel, and DC, they'll come later, along with Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. Right now, I'm thinking about going to the Eminence in Shadowverse, but I feel like that would be too easy. I want there to be a challenge. Also, should there be any other transmigrators that the MC runs into? To be continued.